It really is great to be here and have a chance to discuss my book with you, The Secret Life, a Book of Wisdom. And really, Maimonides, to me, really has been transformational and so inspirational in my own life. You know, usually to learn about Maimonides, you have to go to some academy, or you have to go to a smicha program, or rabbinical ordination program, or you have to go to some university or read 1,000-page tomes. So what I really tried to do here was I tried to boil down really the essence of Maimonides, Rambam's most inspirational teachings in a way that is just accessible to everybody, no background is needed, and really where you just open, very inviting, the ideas just draw you in because those are the nature of the ideas. You know, the more I studied Maimonides over the course of my life, the more I saw how incredibly relevant all of his ideas are. And the way our society is evolving now, I see they become more and more relevant. You know, our society is changing. And it's changing in ways that mean that we face challenges that really no generation before ever faced. You know, our world has become relentless. Every screen we face is just bombarding us with information. But it comes to the point where a lot of our day is just spent managing and responding to all the information that's coming in, most of which is trivial. You know, so it winds up that like most of our days are just wind up being managing all this trivial information. It does not wind up being a recipe for a very meaningful life, right? And unfortunately, it translates into the rates of depression that we're seeing going up, drug abuse in our society, even rates of suicide. I mean, it's really not a happy, you know, place that we're in now, really. And I think viscerally, most of us know it. We know that, you know, spending our lives like this, just inundated with all this trivial information, is really not getting us to a place where we're feeling meaningfully, you know, employed, if you will, and really engaged in a way we want to be. So it's so ironic that in our world of constant contact, many of us have never felt so isolated and alone. And that's a real challenge. But the good news is that it doesn't have to be that way. Even though our society is speeding up every day, so there doesn't seem to be any end in sight to this, as a matter of fact, there is a solution. Because there is another life, the secret life, that Maimonides talked about, and that one can live according to Maimonides' principles. The secret life is simmering just below the surface of this one. You know, sometimes when you talk about a secret life, someone has a secret life, it can conjure up, you know, something really tawdry or sometimes even illegal. But the truth is, not all secret lives have a dark side. And Maimonides implored us to lead a secret life of goodness. It's a life where we strive to discover and then develop our most noble selves, where we strive to deepen our commitment to justice, and where we infuse our lives with a higher purpose, all while very definitely not publishing online updates, you know, of every goal that we reach. Learning to keep the right things a secret, totally private, can bring enormous benefits for us and our loved ones and the world at large. You see, when you keep things internally private to yourself, it wells up within your soul and nourishes your soul from the inside out. So that's part of it. First, you become a sovereign individual, and you become spiritual and a person of integrity because of your strong beliefs and the actions you do, that you don't go around telling and posting everybody. First, you keep them within, and you let them well up and nourish your own soul from the inside. Then you share those with your family, children, grandchildren, and then when you share those beliefs and when you do actions based on them, you wind up developing relationships and bonds with your children and grandchildren that are unshakable and unbreakable and are really the foundations of an unconditional love relationship with them that winds up making your children and grandchildren virtually automatic heirs to your value system. And that's really a wonderful thing. And then, once you've nourished your soul from the inside out, and then once you've extended it to your family, you then go outside, to the outside community, and you pursue your higher calling, and you devote on a regular basis a certain amount of your time and money and energy and other resources to furthering this meaningful goal of yours. And in that way, your life becomes really much more fulfilling. For example, take charity. Charity is an area where Maimonides' teachings are somewhat known, right? So according to Maimonides, the highest level of charity is basically getting someone off charity, right? Getting somebody a job, making somebody self-sufficient so he does not need handouts anymore. The famous expression of teach someone to fish rather than giving him a fish is attributed to Maimonides because that's the highest level on his 8 rungs of charity. And, even today, the applications are so numerous of that. I mean, for example, why is, there's gridlock in Washington today, right? What do? There's gridlock. We can't work together. These solutions, look at these principles. How about a massive jobs retraining program? We happen to be in an economy now that is producing a lot of new jobs. We have people that are on public assistance for a long time. So some people, looks like it's very hard for them to get off it. It's because we don't have a serious national jobs retraining program. That would be, say, Maimonidean federal project number 1, a bipartisan plan for jobs retraining, because that's the first principle of Maimonides of charity. Let somebody become self-sufficient. That's the greatest thing you could ever do for somebody. Now, moving to the other 7 levels of what he teaches about charity, they all deal with, if you're familiar with it, they all deal with varying levels of anonymity for the recipient, but also for the donor. Now, sometimes people focus on the anonymity for the recipient, right? The recipient has to remain anonymous so his integrity will be, so he won't be shamed that he is known to be someone who collects charity, and that's part of it. But the other part is that the donor be anonymous, and that's part of the equation. And that gets into the areas of the personal development of the donor. You see, charity is really about give, right? Because that's what charity is. It's about giving. But the truth is, when someone makes charity a part of his regular life, the benefits, the secret benefits, if you will, the benefits that are not really known beyond yourself, the benefits are amazing of the charity. Because, first of all, when you're charitable, you recognize when you're involved with helping the needy, first of all, you feel how incredibly fortunate and blessed you are that you don't have all these needs, like the fellow that you're helping. When you feel fortunate and blessed like that, it makes you happy. And happy people tend to be more productive, and they then go out and do more good in the world. Happy people just are more productive and do more good in the world. So it's this amazing cycle of positivity that is generated, and that's one of the great secret benefits of charity. Also, when one's involved in charitable work, his sense of empathy is, you develop a feeling that you can feel what the other person is feeling because you're involved with fulfilling needs. You have to understand the person. You have to understand what his needs are or her needs are in order to help them. This empathy is the most important thing, perhaps, in any human relationship. So the sense of empathy that you develop then extends into all of your other relationships, deepening and strengthening those other relationships. And that is just a wonderful benefit. I mean, the strength of all your relationships grows exponentially. And, another benefit, it's not finally because there are many, but another one is that when you get used to parting with your money regularly for charity, you wind up developing a healthy emotional detachment from money. And when you do that, when you get used to parting with money on a regular basis for charitable purposes, when a good business opportunity comes along, you're much less averse to taking advantage of it, because the thought of parting with your money does not completely intimidate you because you're used to it. It's just like, you may dress in a business suit for a job interview because you want to dress for success. Similarly, thinking like a philanthropist can, in fact, increase your bankroll because it gets you used to spending money. And you have to spend money sometimes to make money, right? So, all of these things are the secret benefits. And again, Maimonides stresses the anonymous nature, not only the recipient, but the donor, because when the donor does it anonymously, there's the added benefit of ego and honor doesn't get in the way to slow things down in terms of the personality development. So these are the concepts of kind of like flying under the radar a little bit in the secret life, because according to Maimonides, much of the good things we do, again, they're not for public broadcast necessarily. You might ask the question, oh, but they're not for public broadcast. You may not inspire somebody in a faraway land who reads about your good deeds if you don't publish everything you do online. The truth is that ultimately what you do is going to become known. It's really the question of why are you doing it? What's the motivation? Is it so that people will like your Facebook page or will give accolades, or is it for the personal development? So you see, we tend to keep negative experiences private. And that's the nature of social media, and broadcast the positive things for everyone to see. But that generally leads to jealousy, competition, or worse. We tend not to publicize the messes in our lives or the confusion in our hearts. We keep all the hurt, disappointment, and self-doubt to ourselves, and those are the things that keep us up most at night and damage our souls. But what if we were to flip things around a little bit? Let's say that instead we kept the good things we did, like those perfect cabinets we just built or those perfect muffins we just baked. Let's say we kept those things totally private and instead publicized the messy reality of the rest of our day. We would find that shifting the focus of our inner lives from negative to positive, as we do in that case, when we keep these good acts of ours to ourselves, that shifting our inner lives from negative to positive can in fact be life-changing and in fact ultimately world-altering. Because again, these things nourish the soul from the inside out and will slowly but surely shift our own perceptions of ourselves, revealing ourselves at our best. Through the techniques that I discuss in the book, Maimonides Techniques, we can get beyond our daily routines. We get beyond the daily grind. By privately making just some changes in what we're already doing, and also without anyone else even knowing about it. Like I said, it's really private. We can get off the merry-go-round and start living a life with higher meaning and purpose. And, there's no better way to do that than to pursue what Maimonides would call your own individual perfection, your own game-changing goal in life, your ultimate purpose that is going to really make your life a meaningful journey. Now, you may ask, how do we do that? How can we find that purpose of ours that's so meaningful and so worthwhile for us? How can we ever find such a thing like that? It takes some work and it takes some introspection. To do it, there are several methods, and Maimonides talks about this because it's really a question of eliminating all the mental, emotional clutter in our lives and in our minds, and developing that focus. We need to, with these techniques, we get back in touch with the beliefs we value most highly. We think of the legacy we want to leave our children and grandchildren. We want to think about what it is we want to become known for. And when we connect or reconnect with the things that most inspire us, we will then understand how we ourselves can inspire others. Another technique is you can go back to things that you thought about and that you believed in deeply when you were a little bit younger, learning from the pure and unencumbered enthusiasm of your youth. But when we spend the time and energy exploring our own hearts, we will find our greatest, most inspiring goals. And again, Maimonides teaches us how to focus by peeling away the layers, peeling away the veils of the distractions and the barriers of our daily routines that separate us from our focus. And once we've cleared away the physical, the mental, and emotional clutter, then our focus will in fact emerge. You know, once you have identified and start developing a higher meaning, a goal in your life that's really meaningful for you, something in tune with a deep belief of yours, it brings along with it amazing benefits. Because working toward a truly meaningful accomplishment, first of all, means you're going to sweat the small stuff a lot less, right? You're not going to worry about, you're not going to get hung up on a lot of, little negative things. And when you're less worried and less stressed about little things, you're able to think more clearly. And obviously, being able to think clearly is one of the great goals in life, because once you can think clearly, then you can develop solutions and coping mechanisms that allow you to deal with all kinds of situations much more easily. Dedication to a higher calling also means you're going to develop friendships, new friendships, that are so meaningful and really probably a better quality overall than any friendships you've ever had before. Because when people are doing the work of their hearts, like the work at ISGAP here, when people are doing the work of their hearts, something they believe in, working toward a common goal, the friendships and bonds that develop, they're without match, they're without equal. Those wind up becoming relationships and friendships that last a lifetime, because they're based on something so strong and so basic. And also, working on meaningful things like this, meaningful things like these, gives, when someone's doing that type of work, he gives off or she gives off an aura or an energy that's highly attractive to other people, which means you'll also just, another benefit, you'll just become more interesting than you ever were before. And that will be very attractive to people because you're working on something you love and you believe in, and that's important. And that is something that's very attractive to people generally. In terms of character development, Maimonides had an amazing insight. And again, this insight is broadly applicable, not only to our development as individuals, but also to our development as a society. We were talking about the logjam in Washington, D.C. before, and any logjam you have in life generally. Maimonides understood that actions are a lot easier to change than attitudes, right? Because if people dislike each other or whatever, it's hard really, sometimes it's like really almost impossible to change that. But actions, you can actually force yourself to act a certain way. So again, just jumping to D.C., if you're going to Washington and the logjam there, if you're going to wait for the polarization to end, and you're going to wait for the two sides to start liking each other before you start finding common ground, it looks like you're going to be waiting a long time, maybe forever. Hopefully not, but it looks like that. So Maimonides would recommend in situations like that, find the common ground. Don't try to make each other like each other now, because changing the attitudes is too difficult. Attitudes will soften over time when actions are taken in the right direction. So for example, another, we talked about the jobs retraining program consistent with Maimonides' number one principle of charity before. Another example would be the two sides can get together and pick two states, two poor states, one blue state, one red state, and do a pilot infrastructure project and create thousands of good jobs, new good jobs in each of those states. That's something which each side would be able to sell to its own base. That's something that could be done now. And again, you wouldn't be looking to change the attitudes before you did the action. Maimonides says, first find the common ground. First find something you can do that's constructive. Don't try to change the attitudes immediately because you'll be waiting too long. But over time, when you work together, attitudes will soften over time. And eventually, you may even get the change in attitude that was so elusive. Just talking about actions, consider how your day-to-day would change if you chose to smile to every person you passed. Every person you pass by, whether family or friend, neighbor, or even total stranger, you looked them in the eye, you looked her in the eye, and gave a broad, genuine smile. I mean, not only would their attitudes change, not only would they be moved and affected, but also you would change yourself, because soon you would find that smiles were coming more easily to you and you were forgetting about your worries, and that smiles were coming more naturally not only to you but also to all those around you, because changing your action was able to, in fact, change your attitude also. Same thing as Maimonides taught in connection with charity. If someone wants to develop the charitable side of himself, but he just can't part with his money because he's a miser, or for whatever reason, he's not a charitable individual. So Maimonides would say, pick a good cause and give a small amount of money to it. Force yourself to give a small amount of money to it, and do it gradually, the principle of gradualism. In other words, according to Maimonides, it would be much more effective to give $1 1,000 times if you're trying to change your charitable nature than to give $1,000 once. Because the act of repetition, the actions you can force yourself to do, and eventually the attitudes, the charitable nature eventually will come into tow. Gradually, in this way, Maimonides teaches, anyone can evolve into a more charitable person all around. And eventually, you may even become more charitable with yourself, forgiving yourself for the faults with which you may struggle. And again, one of the ironies of this is, again, a lot of these things, charity is about giving, giving, giving. But again, it winds up that you get so much out of it in the end. It's just the way, the world is created, all of these things that you get out of doing the right things. Maimonides was also a great pioneer and champion in the field of unconditional love. People don't recognize this. Because of Rambam's elaboration on the concepts of, in Hebrew it's lishma and lo lishma, doing things for their own sake and doing things not for their own sake. By virtue of Maimonides' extensive writings on the issue of devotion for its own sake, that's really unconditional love. And he may have been the earliest to ever write in such detail and with such effect about the concept of unconditional devotion. If you think about it, unconditional love is an incredible thing. The middle chapter of the book, The Secret Life, is about the secret of unconditional love, and it's really, and the secret benefits of unconditional love, and it's really something that it's truly mind-boggling if you think about it. Love that is not conditioned on anything, right? That's what unconditional means, no conditions. It's almost reminiscent. In other words, no matter what the object of one's love does, the love is still there. I mean, we can think of the love of a parent for a child. Very often that's the model kind of, or, people look at God's love for us and maybe our love back for God, sometimes in exceptional cases. But the concept, one thinks of, the story of David and Avshalom, David and Absalom, where, Absalom, David's son, is trying to basically rebel and take over the kingship. And instead of wanting Absalom to be killed, when King David hears about the death of Absalom against his wishes, he goes crazy because he loves him so much. Even though he's trying to conquer his throne, his love for his son is unconditional. And really the concepts of the unconditional love, even love in the face of betrayal, is really such a powerful concept. And Maimonides really was a pioneer. And the techniques that he teaches us can be used not only between parents and children to form the kind of unshakable bonds of unconditional love and making the children and grandchildren heirs to their own value systems, but also, it's Valentine's Day, not a Jewish holiday, but a holiday nonetheless. Valentine's Day is coming up. People with their significant others can study these ideas of unconditional love, and it will be terrific for their relationship. So it's really an amazing thing. And again, this could be a road to something in life, making life really meaningful and lifting us out of this barrage of triviality that a lot of us spend most of our time dealing with. And devoting ourselves to a cause that inspires us also bestows on us a great inner peace and tranquility that winds up informing every other aspect of our lives. Becoming part of something larger than ourselves, something deeper than our own everyday existence. Again, it's so exciting that it'll pull others toward you like a magnet. And with practice, we wind up becoming unwavering in our positive self-image and in our belief that we can accomplish just about anything. And then we go out, we go forth into the world, and we do those things. And that's the secret. So I urge you to pick up The Secret Life, where you can read about Maimonides' principles, The Secret Life, a book of wisdom. Professor Larry Amsel asked an excellent question. What would Rambam, especially, I guess he was a physician after all, right? What would he recommend for our healthcare system? Now, that is a great question. Let me, while I think about it for a minute, let me maybe just comment briefly related to what Maimonides might say or what he may have to offer about something else that's really in the news. You know, right now we're talking about Governor Northam, right, in Virginia, and the situation that he's involved with, embroiled in. You know, so we come up to the question of forgiveness. When is it appropriate to forgive somebody? How long needs to pass before you forgive him, if you will forgive him? It raises important issues because, you know, certain things people did were very horrible and horrific. You don't necessarily want to discourage anyone who's ever, you know, done something bad in his life from seeking public office 40 years later after he has, you know, turned himself around. So these are very difficult issues. But it's interesting to see what Maimonides says about the question of forgiveness, and that is something interesting. And while I'm talking about this, I'm trying to think about the your question, because I've not focused on that one. But so first of all, if someone asks you for forgiveness, if someone did something bad to you and asks you, can you forgive me? So one thing Maimonides says is you should be very quick to forgive on a personal level, right? If someone did something to you personally and someone asks you, hey, you know, I kicked you the other day and I like insulted you, can you forgive me? And he's genuine about it, you should be quick to forgive somebody. Of course, Maimonides would say to ultimately to be forgiven, there's also a level of repentance to God that has to be done. But between a man and his fellow, you should be quick, a person and his fellow, you should be quick to forgive. Yet, that's on an individual level. Of course, on a societal level, where an elected official is obviously a role model for other people, there is more to the equation than just whether you should, on an individual level, be quick to forgive. So Maimonides' teaching on, in Hebrew you'd call it teshuvah gemura, complete redemption, complete forgiveness. Maimonides teaches that you never achieve complete redemption, complete forgiveness for something until you're back in the exact same position and you choose a different path. You know, the man and woman who were alone in that hotel room and they're both married, for example, and they acted one way a year ago, the complete redemption is not theirs, according to Maimonides, until they're back in the hotel room and they say, hey, this is not right. This is not right. So when you translate, how does that translate into our situation? I think it's fair to say the closest analogy is you say, well, dressing in blackface is an insult and a racist item. So how has he done on curing those issues in the time subsequently? So that would be the barometer, I think. According to Maimonides' test, you wouldn't say, oh, it's a long time ago, so it's okay. See, that would not be the answer. The answer would be something like, on the thing that he did with respect to that issue, how has he been on that issue since that time? Now, I'm not going to say, thumbs up or thumbs down one way or the other, but I will point out that in the last election cycle, Northam did use the race card. He ran commercials implying that the supporters of his opponent were violent racists. In other words, he was an opportunist on the race issue. It looks like he may have fallen short of the standard since his blackface incident. When you look at the whole picture, he may not have lived up to the standard of has he improved race relations and has he worked for the cause of African Americans. Looking at his record and looking at some of the opportunism that he employed on the race issue, I'm not sure you can come out clearly either way on that. So that's one application. I think we'll have to revisit the other issue at some later time when we've had a chance to fully go ahead. The question is to elaborate a little more on the concept of keeping some of the good things you do, your good deeds, internal to you, and what that will do for your personality and for your development. Is that? And to bring out the negative. The point I was really trying to make was more that instead of what our common practice would be, as to hide, if you will, anything that's negative about us and just to publish on our Facebook pages everything that's good and kind of get it out there and try to get as many likes as we can and wait for, basically put everything out there that we want people to know about and then wait for people to react to it. Let people like it on, on social media. Let people, the point is that the good things you do, again, are probably going to wind up getting out there ultimately anyway if you do them enough. It really winds up being, why are you doing these good things? What's the principal motivation? Is it so you can have more to post on your Facebook page? Or is it because you really want to make these good things and the ideas behind them a part of your life? You really want to internalize it. That's the point. You want to fully internalize it. And just like everything else that winds up being the subject of public debate and bragging and, getting it out there, the internalization aspect is very important. In other words, Maimonides talked a lot about the personal relationship one has with God through his mind, basically. And that really has to do because devotion somebody has is really an internal thing. It's not something that I go out talking about or in modern day terms posting on my Facebook page. So do you see that it's more that idea of becoming spiritual internally? Convince yourself of who you are first before going out and convincing others, I guess is the point, if that is helpful. That's an excellent question. Both excellent questions. So on the first question, it is interesting. Many people have spoken about the fact that the Knesset, for example, in Israel, could, if they wanted to, tie a lot of laws to traditional Jewish laws, halacha, if they wanted to. But they really tend not to, aside from the rabbinical courts and the personal status issues, of course. I'm not talking about those. And people, for example, give you an example. So in the Talmud, there is a very in the Gemara, the Talmud, there's a very fundamental principle that all conditions that people agree to with respect to contracts will be upheld. You're allowed to, in any kind of monetary matter like contracts, whatever, you're allowed to make conditions and, make a bargain, if you will, and that will be enforced. So even a principle like that modern Israeli corporate and contract law recognizes, is not tied back to traditional law, as it theoretically could be. The short answer is that, aside from the personal status issues in Israel that are that the rabbinical courts handle, the short answer is that I do not believe really anything is tied back, even though there are areas where it could hypothetically be. Your second question is a very fascinating one. And the second question is, let's say somebody's favorite charity is a terror organization. Does he get and that's not a joke because, right? I mean, FBI is investigating all kinds of cases where people are going around raising money for all these charities, and the charities wind up supporting terror organizations who like blowing people up. And that, I think, is a psychological question as much as anything else. The short answer is that's an anomalous case, obviously, and I think someone, honestly, who is raising money for charities to kill people and blow them up is so sick in the head that, you don't really get to a lot of these issues. So they're, just bad, evil people.
Can you explain
Charles,
the difference between charity and tzedakah?
Yeah, it's interesting. When you start translating these words, it winds up, because there are no exact English equivalents for these, classic Hebrew concepts. I'll tell you, Maimonides talks about the concepts of tzedakah, chesed, and mishpat. Because those are really, these principles that I'm talking about are really based on those three principles that Maimonides talks about. Now, so you take them, tzedakah, chesed, and mishpat. What are they? So I'll tell you what Maimonides says they are, and it's very much in accord with traditional Jewish thought. Tzedakah is really your obligation to give based on what's reasonable and what you can afford, and assuming everyone else kicks in what he can afford. But it's not an option. Tzedakah, which is commonly translated as charity, you are obligated to give that. Yeah, well, that's mishpat. That's why the areas bleed into each other. There's a lot of overlap. So tzedakah is handing over money or property or time or whatever your fair share is that a needy person, the needy person really has a legal claim against you under Jewish law, if you will. It's not the kind that he can really sue you on, but more or less at least a morally legal claim, if you will, because you're obligated to, as opposed to the concept of chesed.
Claim without standing.
Claim without standing, well said. The concept of chesed, on the other hand, is charity, if you will, beyond that. Beyond the charity you have to give as tzedakah, beyond your fair share and what you can reasonably afford and what you really have to pony up, beyond that would be chesed. And it's commonly translated in English as loving kindness, but that doesn't really do it, right? Because you would never understand that distinction. For the words charity versus loving kindness, you would never get that. And as opposed to them, then you have the third concept of mishpat, which is justice. And presumably we can understand the distinction there, because there is some distinction between justice on the one hand versus things that are mercy and charity and loving kindness, because some of those are optional. At least chesed is going to be an option. Charity is not, but the loving kindness is so, first, if someone's in need, so you give him what you can afford and what's reasonable, assuming everyone else does. But then if you mortgage your house and you buy him a house and you move out of your own house, that's way beyond, that's way beyond tzedakah. Nobody is obligated to do that in terms of tzedakah, but in terms of chesed, you could do whatever your heart tells you to do. Mishpat, justice, is another standard, obviously. And I would say just one last thing. According to Maimonides, there's also a big point of it. There's no justice unless all the avenues of mercy have been exhausted. And that's a basic key to understanding justice. There's no really such thing as justice until you've given the benefit of the doubt, and until the avenues of mercy really are used up. Then eventually you have to get to a stricter. Go ahead. So the question is, where should if a Jewish person wants to give charity, should it be allocated just to Jewish causes or also to non-Jewish causes? And also, how about a Jewish person who wants to give money to like a terrorist organization, for example, or an anti-Semitic organization? An anti-Israel organization. Yeah. I mean, look, from Maimonides' perspective, Maimonides was basically as universalist as any Jewish teacher can be. I mean, one thing Maimonides taught is that all people from any nation can reach to a level of godliness, and it's not affected whether they're born Jewish or not is an irrelevancy. In the towards the beginning of the Mishnah Torah, he makes an amazing statement. He says, any person can be a great person like a Moses. He doesn't say every person from Israel or every person that's born a Jew can rise to the heights of a Moses. He says, Kol Adam Roi Sheyeh Lo Tzadik Moshe Rabbeinu. Every person has the capacity within him to be a tzaddik, to be a good person, a great person, a person close to God, like a Moses. Because Maimonides believed that how godly you are really depends on how you have developed yourself and what your actions are, rather than what particular creed or religion. So I would say that Maimonides clearly believed that Judaism is a terrific path to achieving, it's one road, if you will, that puts us on a road of possible perfection if we do things the right way. But it's certainly not an exclusive path, and that's why anybody from any nation can achieve the greatness of a Moses, because it's not limited to people who were born Jewish, even though he would clearly say that the Jewish formula is a divine formula for, if done right, for achieving that. But it's not an exclusive formula for achieving that.
Turn your back on your own people.
Turning your back on your own people is not something that he would be so happy about. Certainly he would not be happy about it. Well, that's a great, so Charles' question basically is, how do you reconcile, how would one reconcile American-style capitalism, I guess, where self-promotion is so critical, versus what Maimonides recommends of refining yourself internally and kind of making yourself a sovereign, spiritual being by internalizing a lot of your good qualities rather than just bragging about them all day. How are you going to achieve? Okay, well, that's a great question. I guess Maimonides would answer that, I'm thinking, by saying you really have to moderate your success also, if that's the case. Everything, the middle path that Maimonides was huge on, if self-promotion is going to take you so much beyond the realm where you can internalize, your what you believe in and build yourself up from within, if to the extent it's going to jeopardize that, you have to throw that overboard. And that's going to be part of the self-discipline that you achieve. And that's another thing that is a great benefit of the program and the principles of Maimonides, that once you put these principles into effect, the self-discipline that you achieve and the ability to deal with problems and look at things for the long term. I mean, the qualities the problem-solving abilities you wind up developing are those that any company would be dying to have in their managers. So once you live these principles, they wind up giving one the qualities that wind up, it's funny, even though they may entail a little bit less self-promotion, they wind up giving one such qualities that are people spend a lifetime trying to develop the qualities that Maimonides' principle teaches. And what employer wouldn't want somebody with those amazing qualities? So, works in both directions. Any other questions? No? Well, it was great being here. Thank you.
It was an honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please, indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.